Hello, N4HNH here with the second in a series of videos that I plan to shoot about the Yaesu FTdx10, their newest HF radio on the market, which is the little brother of the FTdx10D and the 200 watt version of that radio called the 101MP. So without further ado, let me get into it right where we left off in the previous video, the unboxing and introduction video. I've found some activity here. It's a DX station. So there he is. Now, just to give you a point of reference of where we left off last night, I'm going to disable.
North America 4 Delta X-ray, Denmark X-ray, QSL.
So disabled the digital noise reduction, and I'll go back to amp 1. I'll turn off the attenuation. This guy's strong, almost 40 over, about 35 over. Okay, so, and we're also getting some bleed over. It's 2 kilohertz down. All right, I'm going to go ahead and re-enable this. We'll knock the noise floor down with a 12 dB of attenuation, and we'll turn off the RF amplifier. If you know me and my channel, I try to work for signal to noise ratio. You see now the noise is, that's that big wall you see in the time domain going backwards. That was that noise. I want to get it to the point where all I see are these little spikes representing signal. So my objective, what I do is I use the attenuator and the IPO to work the signal. Let me turn the RF gain all the way up to work the signal down to near zero. And then when I say signal, the noise level down to near zero. So we've accomplished that. And by the way, you hear that bleed over? It's also going to help with that because we're desensitizing the receiver a little bit because, well, we just don't need all that extra sensitivity that this modern transceiver has on these lower frequency bands like this. So let me roll the RF gain back. The S meter will come up. It works somewhat like a squelch, if you want to think of it that way. So we're saying here, I want to hear signals above S5. You're still going to hear his signal. See, he's down around 1 or 2, right at the level of that bleed over. But you see, even if you do back it up to 5, or even a little higher, you can still hear him, but you're also masking that noise. Okay, now digital noise reduction. Listen to that. Let me turn the volume up. That little leftover grind that we have in there. So digital noise reduction is going to take care of the remnants of noise that are left over after we did all of this. And that's the way you want to work your radio receiver to minimize noise. Now, I was going to jump straight into the receive EQ, but we've got that bleed over, so I want to deal with it right quick. Because, well, it gives me an opportunity to show you why this radio is number 3 in the world now for something called reciprocal mixing dynamic range, which is, well, we discussed it in the previous video. It's the measure of a radio's ability to be selective, to reject the signals that you don't want to hear, but to listen to the ones you do want to hear. The problem is we have somebody 2 kilohertz away. You hear that metallic sound? So here's why this radio is number 3 in the world. By the way, if you remember from the first video, the number 1 is this radio's big brother, the FTdx10D, or its 200 watt variant, the MP. And number 2 is the Flex 6700. Both of those radios are going to be radios that are above $3,000. So here is a $1,700 radio that can hang with the big boys. And here's what I mean. Watch. I'm going to rotate the ring up here in the top right, to the top right of the VFO. You see it gray at 3,000 hertz. When you see it gray, that's the default. So we've already got a 3 kilohertz roofing filter. That is a mechanical filter that's narrowing down our bandpass, as we call it, to where we're saying, well, look, I really just want to listen to 3 kilohertz wide. So now this is lower sideband, LSB. So we're going to be listening to a 3 kilohertz window lower sideband. Now what I'm going to do to mitigate that interference is narrow my bandpass. Now we're only 1800 hertz wide. We're going to lose some fidelity because if you see that move there, we're pulling away from the lows and the highs to narrow that filter. But you hear that interference that goes away. So in a situation, contest or emergency, crowded bands, you want to be able to pull out that rare DX station, get your signal report. You're not worried about whether they sound like, they're an FM broadcast station. You're just trying to go for intelligibility and knock out all the interference. So combination of digital noise reduction, the attenuation, the IPO, and now our digital filter width, and we've accomplished that. Now, one other thing you can do, I'm going to widen the filter back out a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to use the knob here. There's the ring. That is the digital filter width. Now I'm going to use this knob, which is shift. And what we're doing there is we're shifting where the center point is of that filter. So here's the easy way to remember what to do here. Okay, there's default. It's in gray. If the interference is a high-pitched metallic sound, and I've covered this in previous videos, but I'll cover it here since we're looking at the FTdx10. The shift is here. If the interference is a high pitch, you want to rotate counterclockwise. There are LEDs, by the way. Let me show you up here. See those LEDs? If I go up to the default of 3000, the LED turns off. When you're off of default, which is a really cool thing, that indicator goes to orange to let you know that you're operating on something other than the default setting for that particular control. Same thing will happen with shift. Watch when I move it. Either whether I go left or right, counterclockwise or clockwise. Now when that interference comes back in, and now there it is. I'm going to shift. So you see what I'm doing? That noise was a high-pitched noise, so I'm shifting counterclockwise. I'm moving that, look. I'm moving it left, so I'm moving my pass band to the left, so I no longer hear that high frequency in there. Now, by the way, if the noise is a lower honking sound, what you want to do is go to the right. You want to go clockwise. So I'm going to wait for the noise to come back in there again, and then we'll move it again. All right, there it is. Listen. Oh, it quit.
Okay, one again. Okay, Kilo 1 Alpha Zulu Echo.
Well, while we wait on the QRM, man-made, let me undo these so you can get an appreciation.
Okay, thank you so much for Friday night in Alabama. You will also
For how well this receiver can mask noise. So again, we'll work our way from the front end. 12 dB of attenuation, IPO. Rolling the RF gain back, and digital noise reduction for the icing on the cake. All right, there's the interference. So I've already narrowed the width of the filter. Now I'm moving the filter around. Hear the interference? And now it goes away because it's a high-pitch interference. You shift counterclockwise. Now let me show you another little twist here. We're going to go in a little deeper into the digital noise reduction. If we long press the button, now the multi-knob, as it's called, will allow us to adjust the digital noise reduction. And it says level, but really what it is, there are 15 different algorithms. The higher the number, the more aggressive the algorithm is at separating voice from noise. Now, so what you need to know about that is that the higher algorithm you use, the more likely it is also to affect how they sound. It's not terrible. As a matter of fact, I'm quite impressed with this radio. This is one of the best. As a matter of fact, I compare it to my FTdx1000 as being the best digital noise reduction I've ever experienced. It must be an improvement over the Big Brother FTdx10. I'm sure there's firmware updates that will make the 101 work like this because these radios share the same architecture. But the digital noise reduction in this radio is really quite good. So now, if you turn the level knob right now, you're actually adjusting the level of look at the spikes going down. We're adjusting the level of what we're seeing in the scope. Look over there. And why is it adjusting that now instead of DNR? Well, it's because whatever the last thing you adjusted in the menu is what it's going to default to. And you get to the menu by pressing in the function button, and level is what it's set on right now. So if I want to set it on RF power, I'll tap RF power. And now it says RF power. So from now on, if I just reach up here and turn this knob, I'm adjusting RF power. So just whatever you use the most, that's what you want to press in and get the menu and select which one of these you would do the most. Let's say you work in CW and you want to be able to quickly adjust CW speed, then you would go here. So now that knob is automatically going to adjust CW speed if you reach up and touch it real quick. So that's what that's doing there. I'm going to go back to RF power. That's a common one on sideband. So, to get to the DNR adjustment, you've got to long press DNR, and then it'll temporarily allow you to adjust DNR. Once it times out, if I rotate it now, it's going to adjust RF power. So just know that. All right, so let's talk about the levels, the algorithms. I have found that in this radio, 1, which is the default, is just fine. Went back to RF power. About as aggressive as I have found so far that I would need is a 3. So run that as low as you can to knock the noise out. And again, the idea is work it from the front end of the receiver, attenuate, IPO, RF gain, and then adjust the digital noise reduction. So that's quite good right there. Now, let me mention one other thing. If you do find yourself in a situation where you have to run it all the way, like let's say as high, it'll go to 15. Let's say you have to run it up at a 10 to mask out the noise. You start losing a little bit of the high end out of people's voice. And so one of the ways you can restore that, and that's going to segue into the next thing I wanted to show you in this receiver, and that is how to adjust the receive audio. Just like with your car stereo, you can adjust the mids, the highs, the lows on this radio. So we're going to go into the menu, tap the function button, radio setting, and that's where it takes us is mode SSB, audio frequency treble gain, audio frequency middle tone gain, and audio frequency bass gain. So if we're aggressively working the digital noise reduction to knock the noise out, we can restore some of the highs by tapping here. Let me get it over there. There we go. And then rotate the knob. See, we're knocking the highs out, adding highs in. So now notice if you add more highs, you're going to start hearing a little bit of that bleed over again. So you got to find a happy medium there. Now, also, let's say that the audio is thin. You can press the bass button, and we can fatten it up. Now, to be honest, that may or may not always make a difference, and here's why. Some people may not be transmitting a lot of low frequencies in their voice. They may have their microphone EQ'd where there's not a lot of lows in it. So, but now, if they are transmitting a lot of lows and you find it annoying, then you could go in here and lower it. So now once you're on it, if you want to adjust it again, because see, this is just moving up and down. If you want to adjust it, press in on the function button. So now if somebody's got a lot of lows in their voice, maybe I want to cut it -3. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the default on that. Maybe I'll add 2 or 3 to it. Fatten up how it sounds. Now, you might even want to scoop a little bit of the mids. Now, I would really adjust something like this. If I don't intend to use digital noise reduction all the time, I would make the fine adjustment to the audio tapering here, or the audio EQ for sideband. I'd make it based on not having the noise reducer on. But if you're going to use the digital noise reduction, like I do on my 5000, I leave it on usually on 3 or 4. Then you may want to adjust this based upon having the noise reduction turned on. Now, before we get out of this screen, because these are the things I wanted to cover in this video, I'm going to go down and show you something called low cut frequency, low cut slope, high cut frequency, high cut slope. Let me explain those. So I work in music and audio and in the engineering industry, and so there's some terminology in our world we call shelving. So as opposed to an equalizer where you just have a frequency range and you want to boost it or cut it, this is the opportunity to pick what's the highest frequency you want to hear and what's the lowest frequency you want to hear. So let's say, for example, that we don't really want our radio to produce any frequencies lower than 100 hertz. We can maybe move it up to 200. You notice, by the way, the defaults are in yellow here, and when you move off of that, they turn white. They were gray on the other controls, but in the menu, they're yellow. So now we're saying I want to, anything below 200 hertz, I really don't want to hear much. But how much of it do I not want to hear? That's what the slope does. So I'm telling the radio I want to drop it by 6 decibels per octave. Now, so here's how to think of an octave. A 1 octave below 200 hertz is 100 hertz. So what we're saying is by the time it gets to 100 hertz, I want the level of that audio, the low frequency of the audio, to have dropped off by 6 decibels, which is quite a bit. But you can almost make it like a brick wall. In other words, you're saying, at this point, this is a gentle slope down to 100 hertz, if you will. But we can make it sharp. We can say, listen, I don't really want to hear much at all below 200 hertz. And in that case, what we do is we tap this button, tap the function button, and we move this to 18. You have a choice of 6 dB or 18, and 6 dB, as you can see, is the default. But if you really say, look, I want to drop it off quickly. Now, I'll just tell you my own experience. I generally run it at the 6 dB. I let it gently slope off on the low end. And then for the highs here, I generally run somewhere 150 to 200 hertz. If you get such a low frequency in there, and then you've got somebody who's transmitting intentionally a lot of lows in their voice, it's going to get your speaker's going to rattle, and it's going to they're going to almost sound like a bullfrog. So you might experiment with this, but Yaesu's default is 100, but I sometimes raise mine to 150 or 200. I'll just do a happy medium there and make that 150. Now, you can do the same thing for the high end, okay? And this is really important because this can help you with noise. So the noise is generally in the higher frequency ranges, and, the human voice is going to fall between 300 and 3,000 hertz. So we don't really need to hear anything above 3,000 hertz. So the way it's set out of the box, if you will, from Yaesu, is they have it set to. Let me zoom in on that a little bit. I'll hope you can read that. It's a little bit bright. Let me make an adjustment to the camera here for a second. What we're doing here is we're saying that at 3,000 hertz, we want to begin to taper off or roll off the highs at 6 dB per octave. So what we're saying there is at 6,000 hertz, that's an octave up, it will have been cut by 6 decibels. Now, this is one where I tend to change the cut to 18. I want to roll it off very aggressively after 3,000 hertz. Now, if you find yourself comfortable with listening at, say, let me move this back up, at, say, with only a 2,600 hertz bandwidth, in other words, you don't want to hear a lot of the high content in somebody's voice, you could leave it there and then let it slope off at 18 dB per octave. So, just play with that until it meets with the approval of your ear. But here's the rule of thumb. The lower number you can set that to and still like how it sounds, the better off you are when fighting against noisy conditions, meaning, the ground noise, or the QRN, as some people call it, ground noise, but, the general noise. So the lower that, now, for example, I've got an old radio. I actually switched the filter out. It was, mechanical filters, and I've switched it out to where I can run it at, I've got 2 filters in the radio. I can toggle between 2100 hertz, or I can go to 2800, which is the original filter that came in the radio. I got a board from NRAD, and I can toggle back and forth. But hey, look, I'll tell you what. Let me just give you some general settings for that I've found kind of work, okay? One is to do 2800 with an 18 dB per octave slope, or, you're tapering it off, or consider doing 2400 and then gently roll it off. Do a 6 dB. Those are the two I would say. Just try it for your ear, see what you think, and go from there. So again, receive audio adjustments are really, really quite good in this radio. Very, very impressive. I'll just leave these like they are. I mean, if anything, I would consider coming in here and maybe scooping the mids just a little bit. We call that scooping. In other words, cut a little bit of the mid-range out. I don't know. That's just a matter of personal taste. Let me try it that way and see how it sounds. So I'm gonna select back and back one more time. So I'm back out to the main screen. Now remember, I'm running the digital noise reduction right now, very aggressive. Let me long press. And I'm going to lower that back down to what I consider to be a more happy medium, okay? So I think that's a pretty good setting right there. So I'm on 2 for digital noise reduction. And the IPO, the attenuation, and the RF gain have helped me work the noise down to where the 2 is enough. If you don't have these engaged, then you may need a more aggressive algorithm, more up around 5, 6, or 7. And again, if you run it so aggressive that it starts cutting some of the fidelity, then press in the menu, go to radio settings. There's your mode SSB, and you can go in there, add highs, cut highs. I thought I hit my VFO. I should have hit the lock button over here to the bottom right of the VFO knob. Let me zoom out so you can see that. Bottom and right of the VFO you can lock. It'll tell you that on the screen. So now I can move the knob and it won't matter. So there are buttons around the VFO dial, and so in pressing those you might accidentally hit the dial, so the lock can come in handy. And again, they have a nice LED in there to let you know that it is locked. So, let me recap. We long press the digital noise reduction button, and it will bring up the opportunity for us to use the multi-knob to adjust that level. But see, I didn't do it in time. It reverted back to RF power. So long press, and then start turning it. Look at that. I went up to a very aggressive algorithm, 10. But we indeed only hear him. But see, notice his voice has got a lot of lows in it. So if I'm in that situation, I'm going to carry on a QSO with him. I might go in here and I might bump the highs. Okay, you see how that works? But if I'm going to run a less aggressive digital noise reduction, maybe I'll just go back to 2. We'll go with 3 for now. Now, yes, you can hear a little bit of the noise creeping back in there, but he's strong enough I can turn my RF gain counterclockwise and mask that noise out that way, but I'll still hear him when he talks. Listen. By the way, general rule, if you're wondering, well, where do you adjust that RF gain? Well, until the noise goes away, but you can still hear the station, or you can just look at what the S meter deflection is. So he's right around 3 to 5. Now again, 3 to 5 with attenuation and IPO, but so maybe I'll rotate the RF gain till the needle hits 5. I'll still be able to hear him. So there you go. You know, it's incredible. Why listen to all that noise in the background in between syllables on sideband when someone's talking? And this radio, man, it is up for the task to knock that down. And so, no, those of you who are wondering, is it better than my FTdx1000 that you've seen me feature so many times? I'm going to say they're neck and neck, okay? This improvement to the digital noise reduction that they've done to the FTdx10 is very impressive. But there are still things about my FTdx5000. I won't go into that on this video because I'm actually going to do a shootout between the two radios at some point. But there are things about the 5000 that I still prefer. For one thing, I like all the knobs, and you know it's a full-size base station. But think about it, this radio is great for field day. You could run it as a mobile. Really, I've actually got a radio over here on the shelf, a Yaesu FT890 that I ran mobile for from about 2005 until in the current truck. I've had the radio since '91, but I ran it in my truck from 2005 until just a couple of years ago, and it's a great mobile. And this is really about the size of the FT890. So you could use this as a mobile rig, but certainly it's a great field day rig. It would also be a great backup rig for your shack. But to be honest with you, it can make a great base station if you don't care to have a big old radio sitting up on your desk, you know. So, all right, with that, we'll end this video. And I want to thank my Patreons for helping me keep this channel going. It really means a lot that you care about content like this, where we go into the operating techniques on these various radios. And remember, a lot of the things I show you on the various radios can apply to other radios. These kinds of features are included on other Yaesu rigs, and some of them are even featured on some of the other brands of radios. There are a few features we're going to cover in future videos on this radio that are unique to Yaesu. I'll give you a hint, things like contour and audio peak filter. There are a couple other manufacturers out there that are including that, but it's few and far between that you'll see those features on other radios. And I do plan in future videos to get into showing you what those features do, how they benefit you. Okay, again, but thanks, Patreons, and if you're not a Patreon and want to become one, please feel free to do so. It would be much appreciated. You can go to www.patreon.com/N4HNH, my call sign. That's www.patreon.com/N4HNH. And please like the video, subscribe. If you click the bell, you'll be notified every time I upload another video in this series, so you won't miss anything. Okay, thanks for watching, and this is N4HNH saying 73.